Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Informal Contact Center opportunity. I'm Irwin Lazar, President and Principal Analyst at Metrigy Research, and excited to have on our panel today Mike Wilkinson, Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Akixi, and Doug Kreitz at Virtual Guardian. So why don't we start with having each one of you introduce yourself and your organization and your role in the contact center ecosystem. So Mike, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Irwin, and thanks for taking the time this afternoon to listen to us, everyone. So, as Irwin said, I look after product and marketing at Akixi. So, Akixi is a cloud services business which provides analytics and insights to many of the most popular cloud communication platforms out there. So probably the one we're most well known for is attachment into the Cisco ecosystem. So that's the Cisco BroadWorks infrastructure, plus also WebEx calling. We're also in process of bringing out a new set of attachments, which will be out a little bit later this year, connecting into the Microsoft Teams infrastructure. So Akixi has been around for over 10 years now, and we have nigh on 500,000 users connected onto our service, providing solutions into many of the largest service providers in the market today.
Excellent. And Doug, how about tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Doug Kreitz with Virtual Guardians. I'm the president of Virtual Guardians. We're a small integrator out of Florida. Been in the industry since the 90s and have been doing this kind of work for a very long time, as you can see by the gray beard. We are a Cisco certified provider of services, including communication, collaboration, and connection. So for today's discussion, we're going to be focusing on the communication portion of our portfolio, which includes business phone systems and informal contact center. And that's where we align with Akixi.
Excellent. So the goal of our session is to talk about what is a lightweight contact center and what are some of the needs that businesses have and what are some of the opportunities for value-added resellers to deliver services that meet those needs. So let's start with the definition of informal or lightweight contact center. I'll start with Mike. What is a lightweight contact center in your opinion?
I think, it's one of those things where, as an industry a few years ago, we used to argue over the definition of what was UCaaS, right? And, everybody had kind of different types of perspectives on it. And I think informal contact center is somewhat similar insofar as it encompasses a whole range of capabilities in terms of staff management, performance management of inbound calling into a particular organization, and then some of the call control aspects. And effectively what it is to an organization who may not actually think they need a contact center, but they do actually understand they need to perform specific actions as a result of that. So rather than going and, in effect, getting a hammer to crack a nut, which a full-blown contact center is, they go and look at the solutions which attach into the UCaaS platforms, which have the sort of familiarity in terms of look and feel. And so it's a relatively small lift for them, and they can incorporate them into their workflows and basically make use of those capabilities. So is it a low-cost contact center? Well, no, not really in some respects. Some of those aspects, some of the solution capabilities can provide quite a lot of value and have a price associated with it, but they do fix specific issues associated with customer engagement, customer experience, and the management of that.
Excellent. And Doug, how about your thoughts? And I'm curious to hear what you see as a difference, say, between a lightweight or informal contact center and just setting up a call queue.
So I think that's a really good point, Irwin. The key differentiators for me are, it's almost easier to say what a lightweight contact center is not. One of the key feature differentiators is ACD versus IVR. And those terms have been bantered around the industry a little bit. For this conversation, ACD is automatic call distribution, and think of it as an auto attendant or group of auto attendants attached to queues. Whereas an IVR actually will take input from the user and do a database dip in some other database somewhere in order to pull its information back and then make a decision as to how to route the call. So a lot of times you'll hear somebody gloss over it and say, oh, complex call routing. Well, complex call routing to me is in the event where I have to have data from something else outside of the calling environment in order to make a decision on routing a call. The other piece to the puzzle is size and scale. If a business survives with large rooms full of agents and supervisors, the informal contact center is not designed to handle that. However, what I am finding in the small, medium business environment is that about 80% of the businesses I touch have some need for call routing and tracking, to the point where the contact center solution that we're able to offer with a Kixie's help is definitely of interest to them.
Yeah, we see that as well in our research, that, you know, the formal definition of a contact center of being a place with agents, supervisors handling large volumes of calls. There's certainly obviously lots of that around, but there's a lot more contact centers that need some of that kind of functionality. So, you know, I guess let me kind of dig into that a little bit. What do you see as some of the use cases, the kind of businesses that have this need for more of a lightweight and informal contact center? And Doug, I'll start with you on this one.
Okay, so basically, the contact center role in the business is that it has a large amount of data regarding the business customers and employee performance. And really that's where I'm finding that businesses are interested in the lightweight contact center specifically. If they can get to the end of the day and determine how many calls have come in that have not been returned, then that impacts the revenue. And so that's a key piece of where the smaller medium businesses, the non-big rooms with agents and stuff, actually get benefit from a contact center environment. And then the other half of the equation is on the agent side, the ability to, you know, even if I'm a small dental office with 9 receptionists across 3 locations, if they back each other up, then I have the ability to look at the relative performance of those agents, if you will, even though they're generally looked at as reception people in the office, and being able to make decisions around you know, employees and staffing amounts, et cetera.
And anything to add to that, Mike, in terms of the definitions, use cases of you know, where the lightweight or informal contact center is appropriate?
Yeah, so let's sort of rewind back to the first question of, you know, what the definition is. And I think, you know, one of the things that we see quite often is that there isn't someone who's responsible for a contact center buying it. Okay, so it's the purchaser is either the business owner, the finance department, customer services. They've got a specific problem which they want to have solved, and they may not even be aware that there's a thing called a contact center out there that solves it. So then you get the solution provider comes in and says, I've got one of these, it solves these issues. Is that okay? Great. Then I got some user licenses to fit onto that. All good. In terms of use cases, I'll sort of put them in 4 broad categories. Okay, so there's what I call compliance use cases. So if you take something like retail motor dealers, okay, if you're a franchisee of one of the sort of premier car motor manufacturers, you have to comply with certain SLAs as part of your franchise agreement. So, for example, you have to answer calls within 3 rings. You have to, when you sell a car, follow up with that customer, not by email, but by a recorded voice call, which is coming from a specific DNIS number, okay, to ensure that that is logged and it's part of the SLA, and you can prove via an audit trail that it's delivered. There are similar compliance requirements within healthcare in certain markets. Some are stricter than others, but it's typically focused around access to services. So that's the first one. Second one is what Doug touched on, which was revenue assurance. So in effect, you've got, especially in things like retail, you'll have a lot of customers calling into certain types of business. And associated with that inbound sales inquiry, for example, there'll be something called lost basket value. So a lost basket value is typically the loss of that sale because you didn't answer the call. Okay, and so in something like sticking on the motor theme, motor retail, so tires, parts, etc., you will have a lost basket value of maybe $300. Okay, so as a result of that, you look at the number of missed calls multiplied by the lost basket value is a pretty easy ROI to sum up to manage that and make sure you've got the required coverage. Third one we've seen is change management. In fast food retail, most recently, you're seeing quite a lot of the personnel in fast food retail outlets being equipped with either DECT or Bluetooth headsets. And that's to increase productivity, especially now as you have things like Uber Eats, Just Eat, etc. coming in. So you have these different ways of consuming their product, which means the staff have to work in slightly different patterns, but they need to be more productive in the way that they work. So as a result of that, you see that you employ a range of contact center-like capabilities on top of the fast food retail outlet, and you're measuring performance before and after. Okay, so change management is another one we've seen. And then finally, resource optimization. This is a very typical one in healthcare, where demand exceeds supply. And that starts right at the front end, where you see the inquiries coming into the healthcare organization. They have insufficient staff to be able to process all of those inquiries. So they're looking at ways and means of improving efficiencies. So the analytics that sit there, combined with the contact center-like capabilities which are applied, brought together to then help them improve the efficiency for access to services.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Kixie's offering, and what do you bring to the table to solve the challenges in those 4 use cases, and probably more as well?
So in many cases, what we do is produce a large range of reports which assist those end user businesses to either prove they're delivering against the compliance, help them optimize their revenue assurance. So what you find in revenue assurance, the most critical applications tend to be where you got this combination of value versus timeliness. Okay, and what I mean by that, I'll give you an example. Vets, which is actually one of the key verticals we're seeing recently. Your dog or your cat is sick. Okay, you phone a vet practice up, they don't answer the phone. You don't say, "Oh, well, I'll wait for them to come back." You go, "Okay, I look for the next one immediately," and you keep on phoning around until you find one. And so from a vet's practice perspective, if they miss your call, they want to know about that to call you back immediately, because the likelihood is that you not going to the vets is going to cost them several £100s, dollars in terms of revenue. So having the ability to track those unanswered calls and then bring them back up to the attention of the operators to get back to you quickly improves the revenue assurance associated with those businesses. So those are some of the things we do. We also have a range of call control capability that sits on top of the existing queue management within the UCaaS system. And probably most importantly is the range of reports we provide to provide the guidance to those end customer businesses as to how things are performing and how they can optimize going forward.
So Doug, as an Kixie partner, how do you take those features and solve problems for your customers?
So there are really two main areas where I've had experience helping customers, and Mike just hit on both of them. The first one is the ability to rescue the revenue that's sitting out there, that missed call, and close ratios 20%. I had 5 missed calls today. Guess what? I could have closed one of those deals likely. So that has been a really big factor, and Akixi does a great job of having pre-packaged reporting that's available to make certain that we're able to see that. And then the other side of it, I've got a customer in particular that I'm thinking of that has hired some part-time agents. And they're really a medical environment, so it's not really agents as we would think of them in the contact center world. These are folks that are basically taking calls and booking appointments for providers. And they've hired part-time folks. And because of the ability to really analyze the environment and tell what the busy call hour is, but not only the busy call hour, but every 30 minutes, what the call sheet looks like over time, then they're able to put those part-time people in the optimal positions. So those are a couple spots. But the thing that's really powerful about Akixi is you can customize the reporting infinitely. And so when I'm looking at a larger, more upscale customer that has somebody on staff that understands this kind of work, they're able to extract everything that the system is gathering from a statistical analysis perspective and put it in the format that they need it in for their particular business. So you've got 2 layers. Canned reports, easy to use. Day one, you're up and running, and I can customize this to the nth degree and make it fit the business.
So in your experience working with customers, how do they typically decide between layering the Akixi type capabilities on top of some of the features available from their calling provider versus going out and saying, what, we'll go and get a full-blown contact center?
So I think the key there is, what do I need the contact center to do for me? First and foremost, the call handling portion of the contact center is a full-blown contact center is different. So I mentioned earlier the difference between ACD and IVR. If I've got an IVR requirement in Cisco's world, that is not a environment where you can actually use the lightweight contact center to solve the problem. So that's the first step. And then if you don't have a need for IVR, the cost delta between the Cisco offering plus Akixi and the full-blown contact center is significant. So it's a lot easier to do that step. And if the business continues to grow, they may eventually evolve into a full-blown contact center. But if you've got 80, 90 employees, 10, 15 of them that are in a contact center like environment, that's a perfect fit. So that's why I focused on the small medium.
Makes sense. And then do you even, I guess it's even feasible that you could have organizations where they may need a full-blown contact center, say for customer facing, but more of the lightweight informal contact center for maybe an internal type of operation?
So that's actually something that they're starting to look at addressing, is the ability to handle the that type of an environment where you bring in an engineer, for instance, a subject matter expert, into a contact center type environment, but only for a temporary amount of time. They're not a customer facing agent normally. So yeah, absolutely, that's another place that would fit.
Makes sense. So Mike, you mentioned some specific industries, veterinary care, retail, automotive. What other kinds of verticals and industries do you see as the most appropriate for the kind of analytics and reporting capabilities added on to existing calling that you're providing?
Yeah. So we've done a reasonable amount of analysis on our end customer base around the sort of verticals they sit in. And I think one thing Doug said a few minutes ago, which is very accurate is that in a lot of cases, the sort of informal contact center will apply into a cohort of businesses which are typically, let's say, less than sort of 200 or 300 people. Okay, and so that then tends to encompass a large number of different verticals. However, we do tend to see concentrations in things like retail, and there's lots of different types of retail. Okay, so that could be, as I said, motor retail, it could be fast food retail, it can be other types of retail sitting around different types of consumables. Healthcare, we've seen a huge amount of consumption in healthcare, and that then straddles out into other forms of healthcare. So rather than sort of primary healthcare, you then get opticians practices, you then get pharmacies, which is another common one, and then you get the sort of adjuncts sitting around that, like vets practices, which are actually just, they're like healthcare, but for a different type of customer. Beyond that, so things like legal and also some manufacturing as well. The other thing we see is that we get some types of businesses which look like small businesses, but they're actually not. So distributed large enterprise. Again, that tends to feed back into the retail environment. And then, as Doug mentioned before, you can get combos as well. So, for example, you'll have informal contact center capabilities applied into, say, the sales inquiries into motor retail, but their customer service and support for booking services on your motor vehicles, that is done in a dedicated contact center, which is concentrated across the entire dealership. Okay, so you then tend to get mixes and matches coming in together. But if you look at the overall vertical pattern, I think those are sort of the main ones that we've seen out there. But lots of new ones pop up all the time. As business, what you tend to find is as businesses see more and more engagement from their customers, they put more investment into it. And as you invest more people, you want to know whether or not they're doing their job properly. So you invest in tools to manage them. And the informal contact center capability is a very good tool at achieving that.
Excellent. Doug, anything to add in terms of what you've seen from your customers as far as the key verticals that you're targeting?
So my perception is that if you have a decent volume of calls coming in, it is likely that you could benefit at some level from an informal contact center. So it's really not restricted to a particular business vertical, although there have been specific ones like Mike mentioned that have had a good uptake. I'm not running into anywhere where what usually starts this conversation is when the reception person for the business cannot keep up anymore. And the moment that starts happening, that's the problem that kicks it off. And then it's, well, how many calls are they actually handling? And what are they doing with them? And what's their average talk time? All the things you need to know in order to understand whether you've got a personnel or performance issue versus you've just got too much volume. And what I'm finding a lot of is you've just got too much volume. And so how do we manage that without just going out and blanket hiring a whole bunch of folks? Well, let's find out when that volume is, and let's put the people, apply the people to the high volume times. So all of that comes into play in order to use this data to make decisions about your business.
Very cool. And echoing what you said and what Mike said, ROI seems to be a key factor of our discussion. That you mentioned the ability to optimize agent deployment, and Mike talked about some scenarios of making sure that you don't lose business. So in a lot of cases, these kinds of solutions can pay for themselves, right?
So the way I look at it is, it's even more than that. They can actually become part of the revenue generation process, not just a cost reduction environment. So the ability to capture those lost deals that both I think Mike and I have mentioned, that to me is what takes this from being paying for a light bulb versus paying for somebody that's generating revenue.
Yeah. So before we move on, I want to invite our audience to submit questions using the Q&A panel in the Microsoft Teams window that you should see along the top there. And we'll get to those questions a little bit later on in our discussion. So I want to take a little bit of a different track. In our research, we see roughly about 30% of companies now that are using cloud-based contact centers. We certainly see a lot of momentum behind that. Is there anything that companies who may be migrating from, say, an on-prem environment to a cloud environment should be aware of? Doug, I'll start with you on this one.
So I think the discussion around this has been had for years and years and years and has basically come to the end at this point. When you start adding more horsepower requirements to the applications that you're trying to use, it makes it cloud a much more efficient place to put it. So for somebody to do the same thing on premise that I can do with WebEx calling and a Kixie would cost them significantly more, even over time. And so that's a key thing. The other two key things that come into play with premise versus cloud is cloud's available everywhere. So one of the reasons that one of my customers is able to hire part-time contact center people is they aren't in the same building as the company. They're working from home, but yet I've got all the statistics to see exactly what they're doing to take care of the customers. And then the third piece is reliability. If I've got an internet connection, I can do contact center. And that's a distinction, because if you think about it, if you have it on a box in your premise and power goes out, you're no longer taking calls or making money. So having it in the cloud and available at all times is huge. So those are the three reasons that I see people moving to cloud to begin with, and then informal contact centers need for more horsepower is making it more cost effective to do so.
Makes sense. Mike, anything to add in terms of what you're seeing as impact and trends around cloud and how they're affecting or how Kixie's taking advantage of that?
Yeah, I think maybe be a little bit stronger. I think the rationale for on-prem just isn't there these days, right? And the reason for that is what I would call the problem to solution energy gap. Like if you buy an on-prem solution, that's it, you're pretty much stuck with it for 5 years, right? And you then just have to live with the limitations that come with it. If you go with a cloud solution, then typically you get a range of cloud add-ons which can create incremental value to the solution. So say for sake of argument, you do start to realize that maybe I'm missing a few calls here. So you add an analytics package into your solution. It goes, yep, you're missing 200 calls a week. Okay, and that's on your sales line, and your lost basket value is $50, right? So you then go, okay, now I'm going to do something about that. I'm going to add in supplementary capability around queuing. Okay, you just add that in as a cloud service to the solution you've originally got. So it's very, very easy from a cloud perspective to bolt in the additional capabilities to solve the problems. Okay, and it's just an incremental license here and there as required. So I think that energy gap is key from a cloud perspective, to be able to flex the solution to do whatever you need. And in the past, I've seen some really extreme examples of this. So we've all been sort of familiar with the concept of like pop-up restaurants, right? Well, in the world of cloud communications, you used to get cloud comms dropped into things like concerts, okay, where you basically create an open air concert somewhere, you put the cloud comms in, take them away afterwards. Okay, I've seen certain sporting businesses, they will convert 3/4 of their staff over 2 to 3 days in the week to basically spin up as a contact center solution, because that's when they're selling the tickets to the next match. Okay, so they spin them up, address customer service requirements, take them back down again. So having the ability to flex up and down from a cloud perspective is really, really important, which I think is ultimately the killer use case over something that's on-prem.
Oh, so I've got about 15 minutes left. I want to ask a couple more questions and then leave some time at the end for Q&A. So the first one I want to jump to is who did you, and I'll direct this to Doug initially, who do you see as the buyer for informal contact centers? I mean, obviously, when you're dealing with the more structured, formal, larger contact centers, you might have supervisors, dedicated contact center IT staff. But when we're looking at a veterinary office, as an example that Mike used earlier, they might not be necessarily an IT person. So who are you typically talking to and helping them understand the benefits that enhanced analytics and reporting can deliver in terms of what we mentioned earlier in terms of revenue opportunities?
So I think the key there is the office manager.
Mm-hmm.
As a title, that's pretty much where I usually end up starting, because that's the person who starts seeing the gaps in customer service. And so once that happens, then they're looking for a solution. The decision makers that we end up working with in most cases end up being in finance. And the reason for that is exactly the same conversation that we've had multiple times throughout this, which is when we start working with the office manager and showing them what the issues they're facing are and what the cost of those lost calls are, then it's a relatively easy thing for them to bring the finance person or team in, take a look at what we've determined and say, oh, this is a straight, really easy ROI for us to get the reporting in place and make certain that we know exactly what's going on with our resources. So really it goes up that leg of the organization. Usually from time to time, I'll have a external IT person that maybe they provide the PCs or whatever for the account that I get involved with. But for the most part, I'm working with those two folks, and then we're working together to roll out the solution.
Mike, how about your perspective on who you're typically looking at in some of those business scenarios that you mentioned earlier?
I think, well, I know someone it's definitely not, and that's someone called a call center manager. Okay, because they don't exist in the customers we tend to focus on. So it's generally anyone but, and then you can get various different cohorts of types of people, if you will. I actually ran into one recently at an event who was a business owner, but he also ran the inside sales group for his organization. So I think he had 10 people on the phones, and we produced a bespoke report for him, which it didn't actually give him any of the stats. All he wanted to know was who was below average on the day, okay, and who was above average. Now, didn't want to know all the stats. So did they hit the average? Yeah, good. Who was above? Who was below? And then who needed to have action taken for or against them as a result. But generally, that's it. You tend to find sort of line of business owners, finance, business owner themselves. Generally, those tend to be the people who stimulate the discussion, either directly or through the IT department.
And that real sounds like the real power is that ability to deliver that level of customization based on specific business need, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the things this industry is particularly bad at is actually relating the technology we have to the customer problem. So having the ability to connect to the people who really have the problem, understand it, and then tailor the solution to exactly what they need is really important. Okay, and that's really why the channel and people like Doug are so important, because they make that connection between the technology and the customer issue. Otherwise, we as vendors, okay, we see some of it, but we don't see all of it, and we're reliant upon that human touch, if you will, going out towards the end customer community.
Makes sense. So just in the last few minutes we have, I'll ask you another question, Mike. So if we have audience members who are looking at how I can build an offering that I can take to some of those business scenarios that we talked about earlier, what do they need to think about? What do they need to do in order to build an offer that allows them to enhance the value of lightweight or informal contact centers?
So we effectively have a couple of different licensing options within the product. So typically you will have users or agents, and they will require certain levels of reporting and call control associated with the solution. And then you'll have people who are responsible, who want to have a lot more insight into the day-to-day dynamics within the business. So what we generally tend to do is produce different license types with different feature capabilities sitting within them. And then effectively what you do is attach those to the UCaaS service in question. Okay, so that can be just a straight attachment, so you can buy the license bundle as required, or in some cases with other service providers, they actually start to bundle those in themselves. So they link it into the classic good, better, best scenario in a UCaaS environment. They'll put it within either the middle or the upper tier. But more often than not, you'll find that the informal contact center capability is an attach option, which is enabled based upon the guidance of the selling party or the reseller.
Mike, Doug, anything to add to the discussion in terms of packaging or putting together an offer?
No, Mike's much more versed in that area than I am.
Okay. So let me kind of wrap up with, if you had a key takeaway for our audience, one thing that they should remember from the session, the discussion that we've had, and I'll also ask this is how can people contact you if they'd like to learn more about your organization? So Doug, I'll start with you on this one.
So I think that the key takeaway from this is if you have a staff that has either a primary or secondary job responsibility is handling calls, then it is highly likely that that business can benefit from an informal contact center. So if I was to distill it down into what's my target look like, anytime I've got a significant number of calls, and especially if those calls are tied to revenue, then the ability to manage that and measure everything that you need around it is critical.
And how can folks find you if they'd like to follow up?
Oh, it's virtual-guardians.com. That's the easiest way to find me. And of course, since I am a calling environment, my phone number's on there. So definitely give us a call if you're interested in having some conversations around this subject.
Excellent. And Mike, any final key takeaway, and how can folks get in touch with you?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, don't overlook the opportunity for informal contact center. It's a significant market opportunity. In fact, it probably dwarfs the official or the standard CCaaS opportunity out there. It's just that you just need to recognize the triggers in the buying community as to what they're actually looking for. So you'll find in a lot of cases, customers will mention certain things, and then you may associate that with a contact center, but then you bounce out back to the hammer, trying to crack a nut scenario that is just not going to fit. You're trying to apply too much technology to the solution. So an informal contact center solution is a really good fit for a large number of customers, typically below 300 seats. If you need to know more from Akixi, go to info@akixi.com or www.akixi.com. You'll find more information there. The one thing I would say, Irwin, is we actually have had quite a few questions as well, which are coming on the Q&A. I was missing it because it was not updating, but now I can see them. So I don't know if you want me to read a couple out, and we can just cover them quickly, because I think we've got 5 minutes or so left, something like that. So
yeah, let's jump into the questions.
Okay, so I think the first one was for Doug. It says, Doug, are you finding some customers reducing their licenses with a full-blown contact center solution and moving those over to informal contact centers instead?
Not in my environment. If somebody has invested in a full-blown contact center, it is likely that they had a need. So I haven't run into anybody that's had one that's old enough that it didn't have features that they specifically needed to have that Informal doesn't. I think if I ever run into one that's, hasn't been updated since early 2010s, then it's possible that that's going to be the case. But if they're a newer contact center, it's got more feature set than the Informal.
Okay, so interesting. On our side, we have actually seen some customers go up to a full-blown contact center and actually come back to us afterwards, just because of the flexibility of the report tailoring that we have. Okay, so you'll find in some cases where you've got deep process integration between the reporting and the end customer business, they just can't live without it. And as a result, they'll end up coming back to the Informal solution. Okay, next question was, which specific UCaaS platforms can integrate with a KIXI to utilize the product? So I guess I'll answer that one. As I said, we attach into pretty much any service provider that is based on Cisco BroadWorks, Cisco WebEx calling today, and we are in process of supporting teams towards the end of this year. So, if you're on NextDiva, Vonage, Momentum, Gamma, RedCentric, BT, etc., you can get access to the KIXI contact center solution. Okay. Another question to me. We already use a KIXI successfully across our user base, so echo some of your comments. You talked about Teams reporting being available. Oops, see more. Do you have any information on the timescales on this, please? Will there be a beta program or preview workshops, webinars soon? Answer is yes, James. We are intending to launch, is it the 1st of November? Yeah, the end of this month. So you will see a ramp in terms of information from a KIXI over the next 30 days. But I think we're talking to you anyway, but I'll ping you afterwards. And then I guess, Doug, I'm not sure if you want to take this one. How do you see the market size for informal contact centers?
So as a small provider, I'm not going to be very qualified to hit the total market size. What I can tell you is that after I have several hundred customers, and of those, I'm going back in and sitting down with each of them in my quarterly business reviews and looking at their business to see where this fits and engages. Okay. I would say probably 25% of them will probably take.
Mm-hmm. Irwin, I guess you're the analyst, right?
It's a difficult one because the market, as we talked about earlier, is really any organization that takes phone calls, and that doesn't necessarily just focus on customer service, but you could have scenarios where this is within sales, where this is within appointment scheduling, like we talked about earlier. So I would look at the market size as really the entire universe of small to mid-sized companies.
Okay, that's good. Okay, there's a quick question. Can you provide a quick update on the Mondigo announcement? So I guess that one's for me. So about a month ago, KIXI made a strategic investment in Mondigo. So Mondigo, for people who don't know what it is a business that provides CRM integration into a large range of different UCaaS platforms. So they sort of share a common vision with the KIXI to overlay these range of attached services into the major cloud communication platforms like WebEx, Broadworks, Teams, etc. So we are in process of integrating the business between Mondigo and Akixi, and I'm actually working with my counterparts in Mondigo at the moment to start to integrate some of the functionality together. And I guess our first view or vision on that is to take some of the analytics that we have within the Akixi portfolio and interweave them with the information we have in the Mondigo CRM environment, which gives us then contextual analytics. So not just saying, oh, I've had 20 unanswered calls in the first hour of business. You can actually define what customer cohort are they your most important customers and what you should be doing about it. So we've got lots more ideas around that, which link to various other things that we've got in plan. But the integration is going at a fair rate of knots, and we'll make more announcements through the remainder of this year and going into next year. And I have to say, Mondigo have got a very nice office in Peterborough, which I've visited a few times now. Very nice place to visit. And there was a quick one, any integration with Metaswitch? We don't have integration with Metaswitch at this time. We are looking at other platforms. It is one of the ones under consideration. I think those of us who've been in the industry for a little while will know that there's some dynamics in that area, and we're watching the market closely to see how it plays out. Okay, I think there's a few others, but I think we're pretty much at time, aren't we? So I think it's probably worth replying to those directly. So I think, Irwin, I'll hand back to you to wrap up and then thank everyone for their time.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we went a couple of minutes over. I hope everyone enjoyed the discussion, and we shared how to follow up with both Akixi and with Doug's organization as well, Virtual Guardians. So look forward to continuing the conversation afterwards. Have a great afternoon or evening.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Take care, everybody.